Hello my friends, welcome back to Microphonic Designs. It's been a while once again since I've done a video, but I've been up to quite a bit since then, and I'll show you what that is here in just a second. Today we are actually going to be handling a microphone cabling rewire or reinstallation job for my good friend Quion Murphy at Louisville High School. His indoor percussion ensemble received their tarp for the winter, and it was printed a little bit shifted a few steps off of center, and so they've made some design changes to their show, and they've shifted their front ensemble over to the side instead of having it in the center of the floor. And because of that, they've had to shift where some of the instruments are, like they've had to change the layout basically. So our job is going to be to redesign the cabling system, and then later today we're actually going to go out to the school to take all of the old cables off the instruments and reinstall everything. So we're going to start by coming up with the new cabling diagram in a really cool app that is within the Google Chrome like apps and all that stuff. I'll show you once we get into it. But before we do, I actually want to show you guys what I've been up to. My website has undergone a lot of work over the last couple months, and I've evolved the company. It's sort of shifted to now include everything percussion for modern performing arts as well. So I'm selling audio gear much more officially, where I've got a whole bunch of different audio products, a ton of field frames, all the microphones and cables and stuff that we could possibly need for the marching arts. And I've also started carrying percussion supplies, drum heads, sticks, mallets, the accessory type stuff. And I'm also now an authorized dealer for Dynasty Percussion. So this has been in the works for a while now. It's taking a lot of work to get all of the percussion products on the website, but I've got a ton of the audio stuff already on here. Like, you know, if you want to look at microphones, you can check that out. I've got a whole bunch of really good ones on here. So that's what I've been up to. I invite you to check it out, microphonicdesigns.com. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this cabling diagram. And I've got a blank sort of canvas here where we're going to create our schematic or our diagram. And I want to take a look first at what their setup is. So you'll see here they've kind of got the offset front ensemble with the instruments slanted with in relation to one another, but 5 marimbas across the front. We've got 3 vibraphones towards the center, a drum set which I don't think is mic'd, and then we've got the mixer cart and synth cart on the outside. And then we're going to have to figure out what we want to do with the lone speaker stack over there towards the center. So we'll be figuring out the speaker stuff on the fly a little bit. I talked with Quion the other day about what he wants to do. We're going to try out a couple different things. But the main thing that we're worried about today is shifting around the cables for the vibraphones and marimbas and the synth cart. And it should be fairly straightforward because I believe we have a couple of modular snakes that we can use by D'Addario Planet Waves, and basically what these do is they take in up to 8 microphone cables per system, and basically you have this really thick cable that carries the signal of 8 different microphones. So it's basically taking all the little copper wires that carry the signal and putting them in one housing, and we run that from wherever we need to the mixer cart, and we can do what's called cross patching at the mixer, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's go ahead and get our blank canvas in the diagram app sort of set up. So let me get these instruments, or at least the symbols for the instruments on here, and then we can start to get creative with how we want to do our cabling. Okay, so I've got the marimbas on here, and I've got them labeled, and again, notice from the picture, from the photo that we have to work with, they're slanted to face in towards the center of the audience, right? So what this means is that we have to be a little thoughtful about how we run the cables on the ends of each of the instruments. So on my diagram, that particular aspect of what we're doing is not really going to be represented because it's just the diagram. This is more for the big picture of kind of where the cables need to go and where the signal flow is headed. But here, this gives us sort of a better picture of, like on the end of, marimba 2, like here, like we're going to have to run the cables kind of towards the player side of the instrument, and on marimba 3 here, we're going to have to run them towards the front so that they can more easily match between the instruments. So we're going to have to be really thoughtful about how we run the cables on each end of the instrument, and same with the vibraphones in the back. Now once they meet the modular snakes at the what I call the junction points, it'll be pretty straightforward from there. But we do want to be mindful that we don't just run the cables straight down to the center of the instrument, because then we would have to have a ton of slack to go all the way over to the center of this one. So let's get the vibraphones on here, and as I'm working on this, I'll just sort of talk a little bit about how I do this. So usually I'll use green as the color for marimbas, because I figure, you know, wood bars come from trees and trees have green leaves, which might be a little silly, but that's usually how I've done it. And vibraphones I usually do as purple for whatever reason. That's just the color I like to use. If you're doing, you know, using this app or, you know, using whatever software, of course you're welcome to use whatever color makes sense to you. There we go, and I think I've got all of these lined up. So we've got 3 vibes, and then we've got a drum set cart in here that will angle, and I will color this one. We'll do blue for the drum kit, the DK. And then let's see, we've got after this, over here we have the mixer cart. Here we go, gotta make sure these are lined up. So this is mixer, and then we have beyond this, the synth cart, which barely fits, but that should do. Okay, so this is a pretty good representation, I think, of what we're working with. Everything is kind of slanted, so again, when we get to the school later, we'll have to be mindful of where we run the cables, and we're probably going to use 2 modular snakes for this, and I know Quion's got a couple of backups. We're going to need a shorter one and then a slightly longer one, so probably like a 10-foot mod snake and then maybe a 25-foot mod snake. I can't remember exactly what lengths they make them in, but I'm thinking that's what we'll need. And usually for this type of configuration, I want to try and keep the cables from going front to back as much as I can, but we're going to have to do that a little bit. So what I'm thinking is that we're going to run these 4 marimbas into their own modular snake, and then we're going to piggyback marimba 1 onto a mod snake that lives back here on the end of one of these vibraphones. I'm not sure which one just yet, probably vibe 2, but we'll see. So let's get started laying some cables down here. I know for sure, like I said, one of the ones I want to do for sure is linking marimbas 2 through 5 into their own mod snake. And usually what I'll do is I'll start with some arrows kind of like this with the inside keyboards. And this should start to take shape after a few minutes of kind of just kind of working this around here. So let me lay some of these cables. I'll check in with you in just a sec. Okay, yeah, so as I'm working on this, I'll sort of, again, just kind of explain what my thought process is here. And you know, this might not be enough space. Let me move this up. So what I'm working on here, these represent what I call buffer cables. And the idea is that we want to take the cables coming in from marimba 4, and we want to plug them into a set of cables that is in between the marimba 4 cables and the modular snake. Like the connections of the breakout cable for the modular snake, we want to leave that alone. We basically want a brick of connectors to never come unplugged, because the modular snake stuff is the expensive part, and we want to leave that alone as much as we can. Now the DB25 connector of the modular snake gets used pretty much every day, but that can't really be helped. So what I have here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cables. So these are going to be shorter cables, 3-foot cables if I can find them, but probably 5-foot cables that are going to be carrying the signal from marimbas 4 and 5. They're high and low microphones. And then I've got 2 cables here that are plugged into the mics that are on marimba 3. And then we're going to have 2 more cables that simply are jumper cables from marimba 2. And that's the most straightforward part. Now, this marimba, marimba 3, is going to be probably the most complex. It's going to have the most cabling out of every one of them here. And I usually try to start with those first at the school. So we'll get there when we get there, but that's usually what I like to do to make sure that when I get the rest of the keyboards cabled up, we can just test it right away to make sure everything's working properly. And I think that also speaks to the importance of color coding. I always color code everything before I start zip tying cables to instruments, because you don't like the thing that would take forever is trying to track down like which cable is connected to which instrument. So if you have it color coded ahead of time, you'll just know right away. And this is one of those things that I have unfortunately had to learn the hard way over the years. So take it from me, you absolutely want to do your color coding ahead of time. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that usually what I do is handle the color coding while I'm dishing out cables and basically stashing them in front of each instrument so that we know which cables are going to live on which instruments. And that gives us the chance to double check the color coding and make sure all of it is going to work before we start putting it on the instrument. So here at this point, again, this is kind of what our cables are going to look like, but if we remember, if we go back to the picture, I'm going to have to run some of the cables towards the player side of the low end of marimba 3 and towards the audience side at the front of marimba 4, which there's not as much room. You know, it's a more narrow set of, it's the more narrow end of the frame, but still we want to do what we can to make it as easy as possible for the kids to plug their instruments in. So let's see here. The next thing that we can do is represent the modular snake. So let's get that in real fast. This usually takes another minute here, but it's worth it to have everything visually represented with what we're doing. And usually with the mod snake, I'll make these red, and then red, and then I'll usually bump them up a thickness so that we know, that stands out. It's a modular snake. And I like to do this here. I'll pull in just a single arrow, and then I'll just pull in a straight line and then recolor it. And then what we can do is, I think, Command duplicate, and then we can just move it into place like so. All right, so that represents our modular snake breakout cable, and that is going to connect to what we call a core cable, and that's going to go to the mixer. So we'll just kind of make it look kind of like that. All right, and then all we have left is marimba 1 and the vibraphones. And let's see here. So here's my thought process. If we run cables from marimba 1 to vibe 1, vibraphone 1 is going to have 3 cables. And then if we jump that to vibe 2, that's going to have 4 cables on it. And then here it's going to have 5 cables. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can reduce the number of connections. Because remember, the whole idea of this is to streamline the setup. We want as few connections for the kids to do as possible when they set up, so that they can just get the connections done real quick, and then boom, they're in performance mode, right? So what I'm thinking is that if we do a set of cables just going into vibe 2, that will probably be the best way. And I need to pull up the picture again, because it looks like we can run cables from the bottom of marimba 1 to the bottom of vibraphone 2. That way, we only have one connection to make here between these two, one connection to make here between these two, and then we have 2 cables that come back from marimba 1, and then they run the modular snake back over to meet up with this mod snake. So I think that's going to be the way to go. And kind of like we did here, where we should have a buffer cable for vibe 2 that goes from or in between the cables here. So that probably doesn't make much sense at the moment, but it should hopefully here in just a minute. So let's start with this. Let's get this back down to single point. And so this is going to be, here we go. So this is going to be the representation for the cable that is for the mic on vibe 2. And we're gonna move this down just a little bit. 1, 2, 3. So we're getting a little cramped with all of this. So what I wanna do actually is hold Shift, select all of these, and we'll go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives us a little more space. So again, this is not proportional, right, to the actual like, you know, in-person layout, but this gives me the idea of what has to happen when I get there. So we've got a little more room here. We're gonna have a buffer cable here for the cable coming from vibraphone 3, and it's just gonna kind of wrap around like that. So this cable right here would live like back on the, like in the back here of Vibe 2. And then I've got, we're gonna have 3 more cables. So this one's gonna come across from Vibe 1. Let's duplicate that arrow and go like this. All right, this is taking shape. Okay, and then we're gonna do, there's a couple more that we have to do, and these have to go here. So again, these, the arrows I'm putting on now are gonna represent cables that live towards the front of the low end of Vibe 2. So if you can picture in your head Vibe 2, we're gonna have a cable towards the player side here, a set of 2 cables towards the front of the end here, and then a single cable that goes kind of across out the front here. And this should minimize the number of cables that each individual kid has to do. And then last but not least, we're gonna have a set of cables coming across like this. Now, again, what this actually looks like on the instrument is gonna be a little bit different than kind of what I'm showcasing here, where usually what I like to do when I have to jump cables from the front row to the back row is we have a set of cables on the instrument, and then we have a secondary pair that connects at the edge of the instrument and goes back. So we're up to 4 cables, and then those connect to these 2. So really there's 4 cables coming from marimba 1. Like if we wanted to like really represent what this looks like, it would be kind of like this, where we have cables that kind of come to the end like this, right? And then we take another set to jump back this way. So this is more or less kind of what it's going to look like, except these would be a full-on like bundle of cables. I can't really get it to represent it totally good, but this is sort of what we're doing, where these 2 are going to be zip tied together and jump across. And then from here, it's pretty straightforward. We've got one last cable to worry about coming from vibraphone 3, just like that. And then just like we did over here with the modular snake, that's what's going to go here. So we've got the plan for what we need in terms of the mic cables, because again, the modular snakes are fairly straightforward. It's just going to go right here, and it's going to run across to the mixer cart, and that should be it. So with that, I have a really good idea of what we need to do. We've got a plan. That's usually my thought process and kind of how I go about developing a cabling system. Let's get over to the school and get started. I think the first thing we have to do is take the old cables off. So we'll get kicking with that and get going on this reinstallation. So this is what we got. So the front ensemble setup as it will be. And right now we're working on getting our speaker situation figured out. This one is probably going to stay the same, but it's the other side because again, the front ensemble is off center over on side 2. So we're going to get speakers figured out, and then I get to work undoing all this so that I can redo it. Here we go. So it looks like we'll have to redo some of this color coding. There we go. All right. There go the marimba cables. Very good. So, yeah, color coded the cables, but not the mics. So that works well. All right, just gonna finish ripping all these cables off the keyboards, and then we'll get these organized. All right, so I have a troublesome cable here that does not want to come unlatched. So I've taken one of the color codes off so that I can unscrew the back here. And I'm just gonna see if I can get this thing out of here like this. So we've taken the connector apart so I could get this out. And I tried to get in there with like a little flathead tool to like push it down. It didn't really work, but that did. So, as the old saying goes, you never want to force anything, right? So that worked out very well. And then this is an interesting look inside the Planet Waves modular snake. They got this really hardcore like crimp device here. Really neat. But we want to get this thing pieced back together. Yeah, just like that. Slide this forward. And there we go. Easy. We'll just have to recolor code this once we get there. Yeah, these are the on stage. Do you want marimba 5 way down there? We do want mics on that, right?
We can mic her and we can have mounted everything. And
so here I've got some cables that have some tape that still looks good, but then I've got 4 other channels here that I need to redo. And actually, now that I'm looking at this, I need to recolor code all of this anyway, because remember, 1 is going to be colored red, and so on this mod snake the only colors we're going to have is white, blue, yellow, and green. So on the red mod snake, colors got to come off, new colors got to go on. I'm going to try to be quick about this. So I've shown these types of time lapses before. I really like doing them. It's really satisfying to see the zip ties go on so quickly. And, you know, this setup was really one of the first times I felt like I just kind of knew what to do with the modular snakes. I mean, there's only so many ways you can fit these things onto a Yamaha frame. So I was feeling really confident about how I wanted to run the cables and how I wanted to lay the mod snake out. So I think it came together really well today. All right, and here is the final result. Super clean all the way through. That's how I like to do it. All the way up and over. And then of course all the way down as well. Let's get a better look down there. Here we go. Yeah, very good. That's the most complicated one of the day, I think. So I'm gonna keep going on the other 3 marimbas for this pod, and we'll check in as we go. So here's marimba 5. I just finished up the last bit of cabling here. It's gonna jump over to marimba 4 right there, and then it just has clean cabling all the way down. And here's the work I did earlier. And then marimba 2 is basically the opposite mirror image of marimba 5. So yeah, I'm gonna keep moving on. I've got just 1 marimba and a couple vibes to go, and I'll be done. This is not totally ideal, but this mod snake's also like 7 years old, so this is just what happens sometimes. Still works. Like I said, not the best. I'm gonna see if we can't get this thing straightened out so that it's at least a little more presentable. Okay, so earlier I said I would normally have some short cables on this instrument that go to a middle pair that jump to the back, but I've got 2 super long cables here. So I'm gonna recolor code these to red and double red, and then just basically get it so that the correct amount of length is hanging off the player side of this keyboard, and then they can wrap it up and throw it in their mallet bag instead of having a second set of cables. So that'll save us a couple cables. Not what I would normally do, but sometimes you have to call the audible on the fly and make adjustments as you go. All right, so it's taking a little longer than I had anticipated. I was guessing about 2.5 hours to get everything done. Still working, but I got the Marimba 1 finished up here. Gotta cut this. I'm gonna get these zip tied together all the way down. And then from there, we just have to get the mod snake and the extra cables on this one. And then we just have that vibe, single cable, and Vibe 3 single cable. And one thing I don't think I mentioned earlier in the video while we were planning was getting the synth cables, but super simple. We just run a couple cables from here to the side and into the mixer cart, and that's pretty much it. So real simple to get the synth cables in here. Oh, and look at this. Neat. Little plugs there. Never seen that before. How about it? All right. Let's get this thing finished up. So I really was trying to reuse as much of the previous color coding as I could, but ultimately I had to change some things around because the color coding, and I cannot stress this enough, really is the most important aspect of this, where it's the thing that most directly affects the student experience. So take your time and make sure you get your color coding correct. And one last time lapse for this video. I know this video is getting a little long, but I really wanted to give some insight and kind of give a look into the full process that I have for coming up with a cabling layout concept in the Google app, and then actually bringing that to life on the instruments. And so you'll see that I went into this having a plan, and that was really helpful because, again, we knew what we had to do. We weren't trying to make it up on the fly, which sometimes does happen, but it's better to have a plan. Probably keep that channel turned down, because we'll have to figure out, is it the breakout cable over there? Is it the core cable? It's probably the core cable because it's so twisted.
I'll just figure it out.
But it's likely the core cable because it's all twisted and stuff. So if you can push, and I'll tell Murphy this as well, if we can push to get a new one of those, just 25 foot, we should be good. Let me have you go down the line and just snap or clap over each mic, and we'll just double check that everything's coming in correctly. That should be, yep, 5 low, 5 high, yep. And you'll definitely want to go through, yep, that's 4 low, 4 high, 3 low, 3 high, yep. And that is 2 low and 2 high, perfect. So definitely make sure you go back through and reset the gain, and these two should be correct because you just unplugged them. Just double check the vibes. You got vibe 1, yep, 2, that's it. Awesome. So all the channels are coming in correct. The gain setting, just I would say next time you set up for rehearsal, all of them go down to 0, and then have them play some legato exercise or something like that. And then and make sure they're playing it like double forte. Like it should be a nice, loud, and we'll probably want that to be hitting or sitting around -12 or -9, somewhere in there. If it gets too close to the top, then there's not going to be any headroom for when the drums are behind them and the cymbals and all that. So feel free to get in touch if you need help with that. I'm going to give the audience a quick tour. So we actually have the synth here connecting to the laptop over there with the USB cable, so there's no audio cables to run here, which is great. We've got, I think I showed you guys the marimba cables earlier. And then I just now finished up with the vibes. So we got the mic going this way so the cable could reach. Connects to Vibe 2. So I've got a modular snake. Looks all good and clean. And then, yeah, the Marimba 1 cables going across here to there. And then, yeah, real simple stuff. So I was able to follow my diagram from earlier pretty much to a T, which is nice, other than the synth channels, which I've already set up. And other than running into a little bit of an issue with channel 1 here, everything is great, and I'm willing to put money on the fact that the little bit of static we were getting is from the core cable from their modular snake, because it's all twisted up. I mean, I think I mentioned this thing's probably like 7 years old, so it's seen some good use. And yeah, the last thing I have to do is get a power cable and sound cable on that speaker stack, and we should pretty much be good. It's going good. I just finished up this speaker cart. So basically, again, like I said, all we need to do is run a long XLR cable, mic cable out to this, and then a power cable, which, you know, I mean, they usually provide power, what, like at the 50, right? So you could, well, the problem is that I don't know if they have like the multi-outlet cable or if it's just one. But you could just run power to this thing straight from the 50 instead of doing a power cable all the way from the mixer cart.
I like that. So let's do that tonight.
And then you'll have to run a long mic cable. And if a mic cable is the only thing that we're stretching across from the mixer cart, you could probably just chain 2 of them together to reach all the way over to the other side.
I mean, it reaches from one end of the room. I think it might be longer.
That's pretty far. But again,
This is the 50, and then we're going out another.
yeah, so you could just chain another cable to the end of that one.
If it's not long enough, I'll
Yeah,
Plug in from the front.
Yeah, if that cable's not long enough, and I don't think it is to reach all the way to the other side, chain another cable to it for audio, and then yeah, you can use a shorter extension cable to plug in at the 50 to get this one going. And I told Murphy this, the only downside to doing it this way is that we don't have slider control on the console of your sub here. So it's the only downside.
You can balance.
Yeah, and that's not the biggest of deals.
Now, if we wanted to have slider control, what do you have to do?
Run 2 sound cables from the cart. So you'd have to
Can I control it from here?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Okay,
a little.
well, that's fine because I don't change it.
There's a little dial.
The only thing I do is mute it between reps. That's
Before we roll this down, try to strap it with the new cables. This is dedicated. This will be in the 50.
Yeah, and that'll
I'm gonna
do.
go. I'll be back.
Sounds good.
I'm in the arena, so.
Sounds good.
I'll just text.
And I'm all done here. So actually,
We'll have those scrubs clean up. All right, they can come back in, and then clean up. And then if you want, quick warm up and just roll down to us.
Yeah.
We'll experiment with if you have another cable. I just want to see it and like hear that speaker.
yeah. Now I've done the panning. We did the panning so that it's kind of spread across the whole thing and not like I didn't want keyboards only coming out of side 2. So like, you know, they're kind of spaced out, so it'll still sound great. But that's it, man. He helped connect all the cables, so he should know how to explain it.
Did you get his contact information?
Not. I think I have it. I think I have Aiden's, not Noah's.
Well, but yeah, Aiden will be the guy. So.
But yeah, man. Other than maybe a new mod snake, a new 25-foot core cable.
That one is new.
Well, the short one is good. It's the super long one that's all like mangled down there.
So let me know.
I can send you a link.
Let me know. We'll get it from you.
Sounds good. All right, and I am back home with a job well done and a satisfied client. Very pleased with how that cable rewire went, and I'm definitely not going to take too long to wrap up the video here. This definitely went on longer than I thought it would, but it seems that the longer format content suits me a little bit better because, you know, I really want it to be as insightful and helpful as it can be. And a lot of the times, you know, when it's a big job like this, it's hard to compress that down into a short 5 or 10 minute video. So if you've made it this far, please do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. There is going to be more content coming, although I've sort of learned that it might not be as frequent as I would like. The channel has gained a good number of subscribers, even, you know, in my absence of uploading videos, and I appreciate each and every one of you supporting the channel. Hopefully you're learning a thing or two about marching audio, and you know, especially as I get into the sales and retail type stuff a lot more, you know, I'm looking to still make sure that I get some valuable content up on the channel that's interesting and useful. So stay tuned. I will be back in the future with some more good stuff, and I'll see you there.